Montana Territory, August 1882. The wind kicked up dust along the Bitterroot Trail as Kade Granger rode back into the valley he swore he would never see again. His horse, a dark bay with a white blaze, shifted under him as the town came into view, smaller now, quieter. But the weight in his chest had not shrunk with time. He had left 7 years ago with a promise never fulfilled and a debt unpaid. Not the kind of debt a man could settle with coin or blood. This one was heavier. It wore a name: Vivien Lark. The last time he saw her, she was crying into the collar of his coat, her hands on his chest, begging him not to go. He left anyway, too angry, too proud, and too scared of the way she looked at him, like he was already hers. Back then, he thought love was a thing you could outrun. But the years had dragged him down, chewed him up in gun smoke and trail dust, and now he was back. Because she had given everything once, and he had given nothing. The horse stopped at the edge of town. Kade dismounted slow, boots crunching gravel, and tied the reins to a fence post outside the old livery. He pulled off his hat, running a hand through his dark hair, now streaked with gray at the temples. He was 30 now. Too old for running. He walked past the mercantile, past the sheriff's office where the window still bore the bullet scar from the night he left. The town hadn't changed much. But the people had. Faces turned. Some nodded. Others looked away. He ignored them all. Vivien's place sat at the edge of town, where the cottonwoods thickened and the creek ran behind the house. Whitewashed porch, 2 rocking chairs, and a sagging roof. She used to say she liked the quiet of the trees. Said they made her feel like she belonged somewhere. He stood at the bottom step, heart thudding like horse hooves on dry earth. He raised his hand to knock, but the door opened before he touched it. She stood there, holding a rifle. Vivien Lark. Still tall and proud, her auburn hair tied back, eyes the same sharp green they had always been. But her face, he saw the weight time had carved into it. Not unkind, just older. Stronger. Kade. Her voice was quiet but steady. I heard you were dead. Not yet, he said. She hesitated, lowered the rifle. What do you want? To pay a debt. I don't want your money, she said. It's not money I owe you. She looked at him a long time, then stepped aside. You better come in. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke and lavender. There were drawings pinned to the wall, child's drawings. A boy with messy lines and trees that looked like clouds. She saw him looking. My son. Kade's chest tightened. You married? No. She moved to the stove, poured coffee into 2 tin mugs. Never did. Where's the boy's father? Gone before he was born. She slid a mug toward him. I do not speak his name. He understood. Some things were better left dead. She looked at him. Why are you really here, Kade? There was a man in Wyoming dying. Said your name. Had a letter for you. I figured I owed you enough to bring it myself. Her face went still. What man? Samuel Trask. She sat down hard. He was my brother. Kade set the letter on the table. He asked me to tell you he was sorry. Her fingers shook as she picked up the folded paper. He left when I was 17. Never said why. He told me he was trying to protect you from something. Said he made mistakes. Vivien nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. He always did mean well. Kade cleared his throat. I was with him when he died. He said. You were the only person who ever loved him right. Her voice broke. I tried. They sat in silence. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, wind rustled through the cottonwoods. After a while, she said, You look tired. I am. You can stay the night. Guest room's clean. He nodded. Thank you. As she stood, he asked, What's your son's name? Lucas. How old? 5. Kade looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred. You raised him alone? I did. That takes more strength than I ever had. She looked at him for a long moment. You were strong once, You just used it wrong. He gave a faint nod. I am trying to fix that. Vivien turned away, voice low. We will see if it is not too late. He watched her walk down the hallway and disappear into the back room. The door clicked shut. Kate stood there a while, then walked outside. The sun was setting over the ridge, painting the sky in oranges and purples. He sat on the porch step, elbows on his knees, hat in his hands. Behind him, a small voice broke the quiet. Are you the man who brought my mama that letter? Cade turned. A boy stood barefoot in the doorway, hair sticking up, eyes bright and curious. I am. I drew that picture. He pointed to the wall inside. That one with the horse. Cade smiled slightly. You did a fine job. I like horses. You got one? I do. The boy stepped out onto the porch. Can I see him? Come morning, I will show you. Lucas grinned. Okay. The boy turned and went back inside. Cade sat there long after the door closed, heart tight, mind racing. He had come to pay a debt. But he had not expected this. Vivien. Her son. The ache in his chest told him something he was not ready to say out loud. But maybe, just maybe, he had come home. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the crown of the pines when Cade stepped out into the brisk air, his coat collar turned up. Dew clung to the grass and the sky glowed pale gold along the eastern ridge. He moved quietly past the porch rail, boots soft on the earth, not wanting to wake the house. Except someone was already awake. Vivien stood at the far end of the yard, sleeves rolled to her elbows, splitting kindling with focused rhythm. Her shoulders moved slow and steady with each strike, and the blade bit clean through the wood. She didn't glance up when he approached. I didn't think you'd still be here come morning, she said. I wasn't sure either. He paused. Your boy asked to see the horse? The corral's back of the barn. He'll find it. Cade nodded. The air between them held more than the chill. He picked up a split log and stacked it neatly by the others, saying nothing. After a few minutes, she asked, You still carrying that colt? He looked at her. You worried I'm bringing trouble? I'm wondering if you've stopped making it. I haven't drawn it in over a year, he said. Not since Wyoming. She drove the axe into the stump and wiped her hands on her skirt. Then maybe you're starting to learn. They walked back toward the house. Vivien opened the door and stepped inside. Cade followed, pausing only when he heard laughter from the back room. A small voice, bright and unguarded. He's not afraid of much, she said, noticing his pause. He shouldn't have to be. They sat at the table without speaking. She poured a ladle of cornmeal mush into bowls, setting one in front of him. She didn't ask if he wanted it. You working now? She asked. Been taking cattle up from Utah into the Judith Basin, south of Lewistown. Trail boss? He shook his head. Just a rider. Easier to sleep at night when I don't answer for anyone else. She studied him. You used to want more than that. I used to think I deserved more. Lucas came running in, boots half-buttoned, hair sticking every direction. Mama, that horse has white on his face. Vivien smiled faintly. You finish your chores first. I already did. Cade stood. He can help me water him. If that's all right. She hesitated, then nodded. Stay close. Lucas followed him out, chattering about rabbits and creek stones. Cade let the boy open the stall door, watched him pat the gelding's shoulder without flinching. He likes you, Lucas said. Cade crouched beside him. He's got a good eye for people. Lucas turned to him. You gonna stay? I don't know yet. The boy's gaze didn't waver. Mama don't like most folks. She liked me once. She still looks at you like maybe she remembers that. Cade stood slowly. You're a sharp one. I listen. They spent the rest of the morning tending the horse, mending a loose fence rail, and hauling water from the creek. Lucas kept up without complaint. By midday, Vivien called them in with a wave of her hand from the porch. Inside, she handed each of them a biscuit wrapped in cloth. "You've earned your lunch," she said to Lucas. He grinned, then darted back outside, already unwrapping it. Kade leaned against the doorframe. "He's a good boy. He's got his own mind," she said. "But he's kind." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she asked, "Did Sam tell you how he died?" "He took a bullet meant for someone else." "Didn't say who?" She folded her arms across her chest, eyes on the floor. "He always tried to stand between the worst of this world and the people he cared about. Even when he didn't know how. He said he never stopped thinking of you." She looked up. "He left me with nothing but questions. I think he hoped the letter would answer some. I haven't read it yet." "You will when you're ready." She nodded once. "You came all this way for a dead man's apology and a woman you walked away from." "I came because I couldn't carry it any longer." Vivien stepped closer, arms still folded, her voice low. "And what do you think you're going to do now? Fix it all in a week? Say a few words and expect it to be like before?" "No," he said. "I don't expect anything." She studied him long enough that he felt it. Then she walked past him and out the door. He didn't follow. That night, he slept in the small room off the kitchen, on a cot that creaked when he turned. The window looked out over the creek, moonlight silvering the water. He lay awake a while, listening to the house breathe the settling of wood, the distant sound of Lucas talking in his sleep. He thought of the letter on the table. Of the way Vivien had looked at him when he said he didn't expect anything. He hadn't come for forgiveness. But he wanted it just the same. And though he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, he knew one thing with certainty. He wasn't riding out just yet. By the fourth morning, Kade had settled into the rhythm of the house without meaning to. He rose before first light, chopped wood without being asked, and took his coffee standing by the back fence. Vivien never spoke much in the mornings, but she poured his cup without hesitation now, and that was something. Lucas had taken to following him like a pup, asking about cattle drives and prairie storms, about how far a man could ride in one day. Kade answered honest when he could, and quiet when he couldn't. The boy didn't press. He seemed to understand when silence was the better answer. That afternoon, Vivien was tending the garden near the creek, sleeves damp with dirt, when Kade came down the path carrying a small sack from the mercantile. He held it out, watching her pause with her hands resting on her knees. "I saw you were low on salt and lamp oil," he said. She took the sack, weighing it in her hands. "You didn't need to do that." "I know." She stood, brushing her palms on her skirt. "You always used to think making yourself useful meant you were owed something. I'm not expecting anything." Vivien's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in study. "Then why are you still here?" Kade looked past her, toward the creek, the water moving slow between the rocks. "Because the man I was wouldn't have come back at all. I'm trying to be someone different. You think staying here makes you that? I think staying here gives me the chance to prove it." She bent to gather the cut stems of mint and tucked them into her basket. "I don't need you to prove anything. I need to for myself." Vivien straightened, her face unreadable. "Then stop waiting for me to tell you what to do next." "I'm not." "You are," she said, voice low. "You watch me like you're waiting for permission to be forgiven. But that's not mine to give." Kade swallowed. "What is yours, then?" She looked at him a long time. "Whatever I decide to give. On my terms." He nodded, something inside him settling at the edges. "That's fair." She turned back to the garden, and he didn't follow her this time. Instead, he walked toward the barn, where Lucas was dragging a rope in the dirt, pretending it was a snake. That evening, after supper, Vivien sat at the table with the letter unopened beside her. Kade didn't mention it. He took his plate to the basin, rinsed it, and set it upside down to dry. The room was quiet except for the ticking of the mantel clock and the chirring of crickets outside. Lucas had fallen asleep early, curled up on the rug with a quilt thrown over him. Vivien carried him to his bed with practiced ease, then returned to the kitchen, her hair unbound now, falling in soft waves down her back. Kate was still standing by the window. I read it, she said. He turned. What did he say? That he wished he'd stayed. That he was scared of turning into our father. That he was sorry for the way he left. Do you believe him? I think I believe he meant it when he wrote it. And that's as close as I'll ever get. He stepped away from the window, slowly. You never talk about your father. No use in giving a cruel man breath he didn't earn. Kate nodded. I understand that. She looked at him, then sat at the table again, fingers tracing the edge of the letter. He used to lock Sam out of the house when he drank. I'd sneak bread and a quilt to him in the barn. Sam thought leaving would keep me from ever needing to do that again. I guess it didn't. No, she said softly. It just made me learn to do things alone. Kate took the chair across from her. You shouldn't have had to. She shook her head. That's not the way the world works. They sat without speaking for a while. Then she asked, Did you ever think about writing once you left? I tried once. Tore the page before I finished the first line. Why? I didn't know how to say anything that wouldn't come out wrong. Vivien's gaze didn't leave his. You're saying it now. I'm trying. She reached across the table and picked up the letter. He said something about you too. Cade's brow creased. What? That you were the only man he ever met who knew how to carry the weight of another's mistakes without turning bitter. He blinked. He said that? She nodded. He told me you were lost, but you hadn't given up trying to be better than the road you came from. Cade looked down at his hands. I didn't know he thought that. Vivien folded the letter and stood. Maybe you should hear it from someone who's still breathing. She walked past him, into the hall, her footsteps soft on the floorboards. Cade sat a long while, hands still on the table, the letter between them. When he finally rose, he didn't go to bed. He stepped out onto the porch, sat on the top stair, and watched the stars appear one by one between the branches. The wind moved through the cottonwoods, low and steady. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a man waiting to be forgiven. He felt like one who had finally started to belong. 3 days after she read the letter, Vivien handed Cade a bucket and told him the roof above the bedroom was leaking. He followed her up the ladder without a word. The sun had warmed the shingles by mid-morning, and the wind carried the smell of pine sap and dust. She climbed ahead of him, nimble despite the slope, and crouched near the chimney where the seam had split. He worked beside her, prying up the worn cedar, replacing what had rotted. She didn't speak until the worst of it was patched. You ever think about settling? She asked, her eyes still on the roofline. Not until I got too tired to keep moving. What changed? He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. I stopped chasing things I couldn't name. She handed him another nail. That sounds like something Sam would have said. He did once. In Nevada. We were camped out near the Humboldt, and he told me he thought the world only gave a man peace if he quit trying to earn it. Vivien sat back on her heels. I never knew he got that far west. He didn't talk about you much. But when he did, it was like it hurt. She nodded, not asking more. They finished the roof in silence. When they climbed down, Lucas was sitting cross-legged in the dirt, a tin soldier in one hand and a pinecone in the other. He looked up, shielding his eyes. Mama says when the roof's fixed, that means winter won't sneak in. It helps, Cade said, lowering the bucket. Lucas stood. Do you know how to shoot rabbits from a moving horse? Not clean, Cade said. Takes more skill than I've got. Lucas grinned. I'm gonna try when I'm big. Vivien dusted her hands. Not until you can hold a rifle steady with both feet on the ground. That afternoon, she asked Cade to take the wagon south of town, to the Barlow place, to trade for flour and dried beans. She hitched the team herself while he checked the wheels. Lucas stayed behind with a neighbor girl who was just old enough to keep him out of trouble. The road south dipped through cottonwood groves and crossed a shallow gulch. Cade drove in silence, his hands loose on the reins. Vivien sat beside him, arms folded, her bonnet tied tight against the wind. "Past the ridge," she said. "I used to come this way with my mother every autumn. We'd gather chokecherries before the frost hit." He glanced at her. "She's still living?" "She died during the smallpox winter. Before Lucas was born." "I'm sorry." "She was strong. Would have liked you." He waited, then asked, "What was she like?" "Quiet. But she could read a man's heart without him saying a word. That scared my father more than anything." Kade let the horses pick their pace down the slope. "You have some of that in you. That why you're still here?" He looked at her fully. "I'm still here because I want to be." She didn't turn away, didn't speak. But something in her shoulder eased. At the Barlow homestead, the woman of the house gave Vivien a small sack of dried apples along with the flour. "For the boy," she said, pressing it into her palm. On the way back, Kade didn't speak first. He let the rhythm of the wagon and the creak of the wheels fill the quiet. Vivien broke it. "I didn't know if I wanted you to stay, when you first knocked on my door. I figured. But I've been watching you with Lucas. And with your own silence." He waited. "I think I'm not afraid of what you bring anymore. Not like I was." He nodded, slow. "Then maybe I can stop being afraid of what I left behind." She looked at him, her voice low. "You never left me behind, Kade. You just didn't know how to carry me with you." That night, after Lucas had fallen asleep with a pinecone tucked under his pillow, Vivien lingered by the hearth. Kade was sharpening his knife, the rasp of stones steady and slow. She sat across from him, hands folded in her lap. The lamplight caught the curve of her cheek, and her hair was still damp from washing. "I never asked," she said. "What did you want before you left? Before you turned your back on me?" He set the blade down. "I wanted to be someone who didn't need anyone else. I thought that made me strong. And now? I want to be the kind of man who can stay put. Who can hold quiet things without breaking them." She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then you have to stop looking at me like I'm something fragile." "You're not," he said. "But I held you that way once, and dropped you anyway." Vivien's gaze didn't waver. "Then hold me steady this time." He reached across the space between them, not fast, not uncertain. She met him halfway. Their hands found each other, rough palms and worn fingers fitting like they'd never truly forgotten. Outside, wind stirred the tall grass. Inside, the fire burned low, and still they stayed there, unmoving. The ache between them changed, now no longer a wound, but something healing. The first light of September came with a soft drizzle that darkened the porch wood and left the fields glistening. Kade had begun mending the south fence the afternoon before, and now he stood under the overhang, oilskin coat dripping, watching the rain settle into the soil. Vivien opened the door behind him with a tin of warm bread in her hand. "I never liked this kind of morning," she said. "Too quiet. Like the ground's listening." Kade turned. "Maybe that's what it needs, after all the weight we put on it." She stepped out beside him, her shawl pulled tight. "Lucas asked if you're staying through winter? What did you tell him?" "I told him he'd have to ask you himself." Kade leaned a shoulder to the post. "He already has. Just didn't use those words." Vivien looked out at the field, her voice low. "He doesn't remember what it's like to have someone stay." "I do," Kade said. "I remember what it's like to leave instead." She studied him, then handed him the tin. "If you're going to fix that fence today, you better take this with you." He took it, fingers brushing hers. "You always made strong bread. I never said it was good. It's honest. Like the rest of you." Vivien didn't reply, but she didn't pull her hand back either. That evening, the rain lingered, soft as breath against the windows. Lucas dozed beside the hearth, a wool blanket tucked around his shoulders. Kade sat at the table, his coat steaming dry near the stove, and Vivien poured 2 mugs of chicory coffee. She sat across from him, both hands around her cup. "I'm selling the old trapline shed this fall. Haven't used it in years, and it's starting to lean. You want help pulling it down?" he asked. I was thinking more of building something else in its place. Something we'd use. Kade's brow lifted. Like what? A smokehouse. Maybe a second coop come spring. I've been thinking about more hens. He nodded slow. That sounds like planning. Maybe I am. Kade leaned forward. What else have you been thinking about? She met his gaze steady. That I don't want to do the next 10 years the same way I did the last 5. And you'd want me in that picture? Vivien set her cup down. If you're still the man who says what he means. I am. Then yes. Kade reached across the table. This time, her fingers closed over his without hesitation. They told Lucas 2 days later. He'd been stacking kindling in the shed, and when Vivien knelt to explain it plain and quiet, he only blinked and said, I already figured that. They married under the cottonwoods behind the house, just as the leaves turned gold. The preacher from town came before supper, and the neighbor girl watched Lucas while Vivien laced her dress in the bedroom. Kade waited on the porch, boots polished, a fresh shirt borrowed from the mercantile. When she stepped out, he didn't say anything at first. Just looked at her like he'd never seen her before, and she smiled like she'd known that look was coming. The vows were simple. No audience but the trees and the creek, and a boy with his hands folded behind his back, trying not to grin. That winter, the smokehouse went up beside the barn. Kade built the frame, and Vivien packed the salt. Lucas helped hang the hams, climbing to reach the high beam with a rope tied tight. They laid in stock for the cold months, filled the root cellar with potatoes and onions, and when snow came, it came heavy. But the house stayed warm. In the evenings, Kade taught Lucas to whittle, and Vivien read aloud from a book she'd kept since her school days. The boy fell asleep listening to her voice, and Kade would carry him to bed, always careful not to wake him. In the quiet that followed, they would sit by the fire, her hand resting over his heart, his thumb brushing the inside of her wrist. They never spoke of the years apart. They spoke instead of where to plant the spring beans, of the neighbor's new oxen, of how many eggs the hens had laid that week. Come thaw, the creek rose with snowmelt, and Kade built a new footbridge, wide enough now for Lucas to cross with a fishing pole balanced on his shoulder. Vivien watched from the porch, her apron dusted with flour, and when Kade turned to wave, she lifted her hand in return and didn't look away. That night, after the boy had gone to sleep, she curled against him beneath the quilt, her breath warm at his throat. I never thought peace would feel like this, she whispered. It feels like home, he said. And it did for both of them. They never left.